And we're live, everybody. Thank the Lords. Thank the Lords. It had one of the spinning wheels of death just then, and I thought that we're going to get a redux of Crowdcast not allowing me to go live, which would be an absolute tragedy. But we seem to be okay. We are live on Crowdcast. I can see that we are live and recording, which seems okay. So welcome everybody to Brainfood on Tour. I'm always going to do one of these shows no matter where I am. It's actually super important for me to better understand how recruiting and job search actually works in the places that I'm visiting. So it's a pleasure for me to be introducing this topic today, how to hire in China in 2025 and beyond. Now, I'm actually in Hong Kong right now, even though I've been jumping backwards and forwards over to Shenzhen more or less on a daily basis over the last week or so, just to get used to how it all works. And what a fascinating experience that's been. Loads of really interesting ways to interact with the internet, with the transportation system, with the payments, of course. It really is kind of describing a very different way of operating that I'm used to in different parts of the world. Of course, the world's second, possibly the largest economy on the planet. There has to be tons of recruiting going on in China. Does anyone know about it? I think most people don't. Like one of the things that we do have in the Western world, I think, is quite a significant knowledge or information gap between what we are told about what goes on in China and what actually goes on in there. So very important that we kind of peel back through the barriers, peel back through the curtain, should we say, and speak to people that have direct knowledge of what it is to work and live and hire in the country. So today, that's the topic of today, how to hire in China in 2025 and beyond. Now, firstly, let's do some sound checks. I want to make sure everyone can hear and see me okay over here on Crowdcast. If you're watching this on Crowdcast, folks, let me know whether the audio and visual is fine for you, even though I'm kind of in a storeroom right now in my mother's apartment. So suboptimal kind of background and so on. But you should be able to see and hear me okay. Let me know in the chat if that's the case. I am also live streaming this on LinkedIn, it should be. And I believe Beecher is also live streaming this as well. So if you're watching this on myself or Beecher's LinkedIn, do let me know whether the audio and visual is okay and you can hear and see us okay. Quite important that everyone can get sort of access to this. Here, thank you very much, Beecher. Fantastic stuff. Sound very clear. That's great to hear. Thank you. Okay, we can continue with the show. Okay, folks, listen, I don't know anything about hiring in China. I've never lived or worked anywhere in Asia, to be honest. So I'm definitely one of the ignorant ones here. So let me not sort of waste any more time on air and bring our guests directly onto the show, and they can help us understand better as to how things work over here. So, of course, let's bring on Beecher Ashley-Brown, the legend that is. We have Maria Ma as well, who I had a pleasure of meeting in Melbourne. It seems like ages ago, but I think it was only 2 weeks or so ago. And we have Lin as well. Let's bring her on, who is in Shenzhen, and I believe we're catching up for coffee next week. So let's see whether we can get all these folks on, and we can get talking about how it all works. By the way, folks, if you are interested in just joining the conversation, you can chat with us here on the chat. If you want to come on, just raise your hand. I'll bring you onto screen. No worries about any of that. And if you're watching us on LinkedIn, of course, do comment and interact with us. We're going to try and get you if there's any questions or queries you might have. Okay, firstly, we have Beecher Ashley-Brown. Beecher, wonderful to see you again, sir. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Thanks, Hong. It's great to see you in Greater China, and nice to know you've been back and forth across the border a few times. Let me know when you come to Shanghai, okay? So yeah, thanks for the introduction. My name is Beecher. I'm based in Shanghai, and I founded a company called Ajinga, which provides digital and AI recruiting solutions to largely multinationals operating in the Greater China market. So we've been doing that since around 2012. So we've seen a lot of things change over that time, including the use of WeChat and some other things. So great to be here.
No, great to have your insight and experience as well. I'm kind of disappointed we've lost the Sharpie that Maria was sort of broadcasting to us earlier. I don't know what's going on with the camera there, Maria, but if you can, that's it. We love the Sharpie. Keep it on there. That's great. But that's okay. Let's introduce our other friends first. Lin, in fact, how are you? Great to see you. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Lin, Marketing Director at Avature. And I oversee the marketing activity in APAC and some global functions. And I want to say, good to meet you, Hong and Maria again at Beecher. It's been a long time since we last met each other.
Yeah.
So thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here. So for those who don't know Avature, Avature is an AI-powered total talent platform trusted by a lot of big organizations, for example, Siemens Energy, where Maria is from, L'Oreal, Macquarie Group, and over 110 of the Fortune 500. And we work very closely with the TA teams to support you to build what's next. And a little bit about myself, I'm a Singaporean currently working remotely from China in Shenzhen. So hopefully we'll see you home next week. And I've been on and off working in China for the past 6 years. So glad to be here talking about hiring in China. What is it like to be a foreigner, a candidate working in China? So glad to be here.
Fantastic, Lynn. And yes, we're definitely on for coffee, I think, next Tuesday. So looking forward to that. And Maria, we finally have you on screen. I don't know what was happening with the camera. Very exciting. But here we are. Oh, we have no audio though. I wonder whether you can, is there a mute thing you could do, or perhaps there's a, I think Maria is still off audio. That's okay. I'm going to share Lynn's LinkedIn here. So do connect with all of these people here, by the way. Maria, we still have no audio on you. So
Can you
see whether
hear me
you
now?
can use. Oh, yes, we can hear you. Perfect. Perfect.
Sorry. Yeah.
No worries. No worries. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself, Maria? Who are you? What it is
Sure.
you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it was very interesting about my audio and visual all the time. It's a fantastic moment of having this kind of issues, but very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Han, and super happy to also to talk with Beecher and Xing. Very happy to see you again, Xing. And yeah, we just met. I am from Siemens Energy, and I have been working in China for over 20 years. And I have been working in talent acquisition in China and also across Asia Pacific for over 15 years. Currently, I am with Siemens Energy, responsible for the overall talent acquisition, talent management technology. So yeah, very happy to be here talking about recruitment in China and also share how things are differently done in different countries. Yeah, thank you.
Great stuff, Maria. And yeah, one of the things I've learned sort of when I'm traveling around is that there are so many different things in even though the challenges of recruitment are kind of universal, like we have jobs, we have people, we have talent, we've got to try and make the match. We have to make the assessment is correct. We have to have the two sides to be sold on the idea, and they all have to join. So all of the mechanics is at the base level is the same. But then local conditions, local cultures, local regulations, laws, etc., then completely change how it actually operates in reality. So this is the reason why the On Tour series I think is so important, because it does kind of educate everyone as to how recruitment works and what lessons can be learned, because there's certain things you can pick up from how different countries or different regions do things that you think maybe that's a possible thing that we could transpose into our context. Maybe this is a good idea we can try and use. Okay, let's talk straight away. We have to talk about sort of we have to talk about the big elephant in the room. So obviously we have a massive kind of trade conflict going on. It's doom and gloom kind of messaging everywhere, stock market crash and so on. I'm amongst the doomers, so to say, because I'm thinking, you know what, we already had like pretty anemic global growth projected over the next 12 months. Any additional friction to that is obviously going to lower that global growth that's going to mean kind of a reduction of hiring demand. I mean, that's pretty similar, sort of clear to me. So I wonder whether sort of you could tell us what the general atmosphere is like in terms of the economy over in China. By the way, I know it's a huge country, so we're going to be, there's regional specificity, there's going to be citywide specificity and stuff like this. But overall, what is the state of the economy generally? Are jobs hard to find? Is it huge competition for the jobs that are out there? You know, what is going on? Beecher, let's start off with you on this one.
Yeah, that's kind of the big question for today, obviously. And with I think now the 100% tariffs suggested by President Trump, I think there's just a lot of question marks. So, I mean, probably it is important to remember that the US market for Chinese exports has been decreasing in terms of importance pretty steadily over the last 5 years. So, from a macro perspective, China is much less reliant on that market, and they've been putting a lot of effort into expanding export markets, with other nations all around the world. So I think if this was to happen 5 years ago, the impact would be a lot larger. But perhaps today, China's in a better position to sort of weather that storm. And I think, and this is the kind of the economist in me, I think maybe this will be the impetus that maybe the government needs to actually put a bit more fiscal stimulus into promoting consumer spending in the Chinese economy. So you've probably been reading the headlines over the last few years that the consumers have been a little bit hesitant to spend. They've been feeling, maybe due to property prices have fallen over the last few years, that they're a bit more conservative. And so hopefully, if I'm always trying, as an entrepreneur, I'm trying to find the silver lining. So I would be hoping that that this sort of pushes the government a little bit to put a little bit more effort. And I know they have a lot of plans to promote consumer sentiment and consumer spending, because that proportionally is kind of not a hugely, proportionally that should be a little bit bigger, maybe at China's current stage of economic development. So I think there's some opportunities to improve. For the multinationals that we work with, I think they're still focused on the growing China market, and the national government is very clear. They have various strategies, and there's something called new productive forces. So that means putting a lot of effort, a lot of resources, a lot of attention into maybe growing next generation vehicles, or new energy vehicles, next generation information technology like AI, cloud computing, advanced manufacturing, and robotics. So all of those sectors are continuing to grow reasonably well. Biotech and life science continue to grow pretty well, and new materials. But those sectors that are suffering, certainly real estate, over the last few years, that's just been going down, and that's not likely to come back up again. It needs to stabilize and then probably normalize at a sort of a better ratio of their contribution to the economy. But then related to that would be steel and heavy industry, and maybe just recently, obviously, as a result of all the tensions over the last week or so, traditional labor-intensive, export-oriented industries. In our observation, retail itself has actually stabilized, which is good news. So probably a little bit behind that will be luxury, but that's starting to see a nice, as I said, stabilization. So it's a bit of a mix, and it's definitely a period of transition, and navigating that transition's a little bit difficult. And I think, just to come back to your core question, what's that sort of, how is that impacting candidates and recruiting teams? I think recruiting in some ways has gotten more difficult, because it's not so much now a volume game. It's really around finding the right person or talent to navigate in a much more complicated environment, certainly for professional hires. So folks that can navigate these political changes, that can navigate these trade changes, that can navigate AI, finding those people is hard. And candidates themselves have become more risk averse. They are tending to wanting to stay in where they are, rather than take a risk with a new set of KPIs and a new boss or a new company culture. And so recruiters are now becoming more picky, but candidates are becoming much, much more picky. So you have this strange tension. And TA, the talent acquisition function of the last 20 years has just been around volume. Let's get more people, let's grow, let's do this. But now it's much more a qualitative issue. And I think a lot of recruiters and a lot of candidates are kind of struggling to make that adjustment. Long answer to a short question. Hopefully that was somewhat useful.
No, I think you've already kind of completed the webinar, Beecher, with that response. So we can all just have a cup of tea and
Okay, I'll just
enjoy
sign
the
out
rest of the day.
Yeah.
No, it was a great response. And actually, one of the things that's true is actually a very similar type of vibe everywhere, it seems. Like candidates are obviously being much more conservative. This has been the case since the cost of living crisis, right? Everyone's thinking, oh my goodness, actually, I'm going to just like bed down on this. I'm not going to go and try and pitch myself around because what is the point? I'm going to just swap one risk for a higher risk. There's no need to do that. So the aspirationalism has disappeared. It's like flight to safety. And that's extended the hiring sort of life cycle. I think on every job has actually increased in terms of how do you remember during the peak remote 2021, where you know the hiring sort of life cycle is just coming down. The time to hire was just crushing down to like even under 2 weeks because people were just saying interview, offer, let's just get this person in. Now that's expanding way beyond what we normally see because of reticence on both sides. Candidates being sort of reluctant to make the final leap, even if they've gone all the way through process, and then employers being very kind of cautious and is there another candidate? Can we kind of do more due diligence and so on? So basically, friction in the old machine. Lin, talk to me about how it is on candidate side. I know you're not a candidate. This is not what I'm talking about, but I'm assuming you're you're interacting with a bunch of people that probably are on, thinking about what's happening in the market and so on. What are they seeing from, your friends, I guess? What are they seeing as a job seeker? Are they like aggressively applying? Are they getting lots of like ghosting? What's exactly going on in that side of the world?
I think I really resonate with what Beecher said earlier. I think there are a few trends that I'm seeing in terms of how candidates are reacting to this. I think in general, from a macro perspective, there's a huge structural shift in terms of the labor market. I think that's just how a lot of country has gone through in various of the stages. So this is happening currently in China. So there's kind of that like structural mismatch in terms of the job market out there. And because of the uncertainty, one group of the people would like to, like what Beecher said earlier, looking for stability, which is not the case in probably 7-8 years ago when the share economy was like blooming. Everybody was more risk taking. Everybody wants to see what's out there, taking some risk. Now everybody's like kind of looking for stability out there. On the other hand, I think the gig economy or the flexible work is also emerging in China because people want more autonomy in their hands. So instead of looking for one job that gives stability, which could be, it's a question with lots of uncertainties that's happening. So people are thinking about maybe getting 2 part-time, getting some gigs, so they have control in terms of what they are doing, what they can choose. And I think the third part is around companies are going through like transformation. So in terms of like stability, people are, instead of looking outwards, they're looking inwards to see what are some of the mobility options within the company, because company are changing function with everything that's happening. So these are some of the things that I've been seeing.
Yeah, there is. I think we all agree there's a big kind of moment of transformation at company and kind of industry level. The gig economy, there's push and pull factors everywhere, isn't there? There's like the gig economy is kind of being pushed a little bit by employers that are looking for more on-demand type services and less kind of a commitment on payroll, let's say. But then it's also on demand from the candidates who actually don't no longer see a permanent job as necessarily more secure than anything else. It's like, actually, it may be better for me to have more options out there. And we need to see what's happening there. There is, I think, a difference, though, between kind of, what's the term, like a precarious gig worker and a privileged gig worker. So, for instance, a precarious gig worker, obviously someone who may not, have the skills that are required by this structural shift, but they just got to do something. So they get on a bike and they deliver food, let's say. That's not to say that everyone who's doing that is necessarily forced to do so, but a lot of people probably are thinking, you know what, this is not something that's optimal, but I'm going to just do it because it's the best way I can maximize my return. And that compares very differently from, you know, some experienced consultant perhaps that can kind of say, you know what, I'll just take what I want when I get it, and still earn you know, a really, really high level in different ways. But certainly big change. Maria, let's go to you because you're working for one of the biggest companies out there. How has this change? How much of this change is actually like strategic within a business? Is it actually like planned to say, okay, we are actually going to, you know, increase organizational agility? We are going to change the component mix between permanent and non-permanent, or is it more like it just happens and you got to react to it? Like, what's the situation happening, you know, within a big org like Siemens, for instance?
Yeah, thank you. I think it is from the kind of the forces are coming from both ways. From the company perspective, we have been talking about and actually practicing the transformation within the company in almost every organization, every department, every team, every country. It's out there. And we've been in this transformation journey for a few years already. And it is never ending. It is because we have to be adaptive. We have to adapt to the market needs. We have to adapt to the employees' needs, and also the strategy has also need to address the needs and changes in the market. And we do see that people are asking for more opportunities. They're not looking for it's not just about like long-term opportunities. I want to change my function. I want to change my role for the next 3 years, 5 years. There are also a very strong need, and it is increasing that people are saying that I want to have some more experience. I want to have a taste of a different role. I want to increase and enhance my skills through some projects. And that is, I would say, from both ways, that the company is also adapting and creating such opportunities for people as an retention mechanism, but also from the employees' perspective. They're also asking, you know, are there something out there? Can I try something new? But I'm not sure whether I am the right person for that. It is something that I would like to do for the rest of my career life. But I just want to have a taste, and I want to use this as one of the approaches to for myself upskilling. So I think it is coming from both ways, and I think it is
Yeah, I
also the
know.
case in China too.
Yeah, I wonder whether a lot of that is due to the job insecurities that's been injected into the market over the last 5 to
Absolutely.
6 years or so. So from COVID onwards, we've obviously had this situation where none of us are certain all of that traditional career track that was like locked in, you know, the career plan, that's been thrown out of the window for everybody. And we're all thinking, you know what, the only way in which we're going to securitize our futures is to get maximum skill exposure, maximum increase of network. You know, do we understand what's happening within the rest of the business? Do they see me? You know, all of that psychology is making people a lot more kind of mobile, almost career management internally within the business, rather than just sitting there and just waiting for the annual promotion and, you know, seeing where, you know, the river takes you, so to say. Okay, let's talk about sort of the approaches that companies go to attract talent in China. How does it work? Obviously, again, it's very different. We know that some of the traditional things that, you know, Western countries use probably are not going to be sort of either suitable or available here. Different technology ecosystem. How does it work here? For instance, is there a local version of LinkedIn that does the professional networking? Is it more like a job board that is dominant? Where are agencies fitting into this worldview? Are there talent marketplaces? How does all this look in the China landscape? I'll throw it out to anybody to answer this.
I can say something about that. We do have a lot of experience of that, and it is at the same time challenging for companies like us, and also I think it is also beneficial for companies and candidates to come together, because we often even today that people would ask me in my social life, not in my enterprise life, that people would ask me, what does Siemens do? Yeah, I know this company. I have a Siemens fridge at home. I have a Siemens washing machine. And today, even like it's more difficult because I have a Siemens Energy. One word more in my company name. It's not just about Siemens, it's Siemens Energy. Then what does Siemens Energy do? All right, it's about energy transmission, electricity transmission, power generation, etc. So I think it is okay for a lot of consumer products types of companies that people would know from their products, but especially for companies like Siemens or Siemens Energy, it is very difficult for people to know what exactly we do and how a working day would look like in a company like this. What does it mean if I am an engineer? I'm studying engineering, I'm studying mechanics, I'm studying, for example, data science. Does it have a job opportunity for me, for my type of profile? People don't know that. So what we do is we don't have a LinkedIn. I don't think that we have a LinkedIn like local type of LinkedIn, but we have all different social media platforms. WeChat is definitely predominant. But I think now today, more and more companies are seeing the importance and the criticality of the company website. So a lot of information can be found there, and it is also a very good channel for companies, and people are seeing the importance of that I would say, compared to like 5 years ago, that a lot of people would still go to a company website to seek authentic information there. Of course, in China, which is different market practice compared to other countries, is the job board is still a very important channel for companies and candidates to come together. I'm based in Australia, so here we use a search engine. We use LinkedIn for such type of information search. But in China, people still very much rely on job boards. And also with the technology advancements and investments, those job boards are also making a huge investments to build their technology, to enhance their technology. So, and also try to win the battle against other, for example, search engine or AI, or for example, DeepSeek, all that type of things. They want to have the adherence from both the companies, the recruiters and candidates, so that they can chat in their backends. And they are trying all the different ways to bring people together and stay on the job board, at least on the back end. So that is, I would say, from what I can share as my experience. And over to you, Xin or Beecher. Anything else that you would like to add?
Yeah, we conducted some market research of about 200 foreign invested companies around the middle of last year. So the data is relatively fresh. And to echo Maria's point, like job boards are probably accounting for, in this study at least, around 30% of hires. So they're the public job boards where you post a job. But it's interesting. China uses job boards, but the way people learn about the company is often through the company's WeChat account. So you'll see maybe they, if you're looking at the CRM, you can see that they looked at your WeChat account. They applied through the job board. They applied on the job board, but they shared a link through the WeChat account, or a combination of the two. So WeChat accounts are kind of the replacement in China of global career sites, which I think in a lot of markets around the world are the number one channel. Here in China, the global career site itself is probably only 2 or 3% of total hires, often because the language issue, but most recently due to personal information protection regulations, means that Chinese applicants need to apply on systems that are hosted and based in China. So the WeChat account is just tremendously important. And because WeChat is social by nature, then referrals through WeChat are really important. So I think WeChat itself accounts for maybe 11% of total hires, and referrals are another 13%. Obviously, that depends on your function and industry. But
Oh, we've lost Beecher momentarily, but that's okay. I think we get the picture. I think WeChat is, I mean, WeChat is a mystery to people outside of China, really. But it's, I mean, people are becoming aware of it because it's got this reputation as being like essentially a mega app, and in other words, an app of apps. You know, I've got a WeChat on my phone. It's basically that and Alipay with basically loads of apps within it. And from that, you can basically interact. For the folks who are not aware, what this feels like, it's basically like it's basically as if one app has replaced like half the internet, so to say. So rather than going into a search engine and searching for stuff, you just sort of open up an app and there'll be just multiple options as to what you want to do there. And of course, most of the time, the things you want to do are going to be actually quite limited. You're going to find information, you're going to buy something, you're going to pay for something. You know, there's limitations as to what you really, or maybe some entertainment, but there's really 4 or 5 main things that, you know, you're going to open up an app for. And WeChat basically enables all of this to happen. And what you're saying, Beecher, is if you're a serious business or a serious recruitment, you're hiring something or somebody within China, you need to basically be prominent on WeChat. You can't have that as a dormant account, right? That has to be one of your dominant sort of ways you're investing your energy.
Yeah, and you need to have authentic information within that WeChat account. So that's the other thing that we've seen over the last few years, this sort of drive to authenticity. And because WeChat is social, having that authentic information, ideally from your existing employees, that's how the best companies communicate what makes Siemens a great place to work, or what makes you know, your company a great place to work. It's those authentic stories, but delivered through the channel of their preference, which is largely still WeChat. And just to throw in another data point, WeChat accounts for 90 minutes of the average person in China's time online every day. 90 minutes, if you can believe that.
Yeah, that's dominant. I mean, basically, people are using it almost all the time if they're traveling, commuting. I mean, that's also prime time to basically present employer branding stuff. I mean, generally speaking, I think when you're doing EB or talent attraction, there's a psychologically, there's a really weird sort of moment as to when this makes sense. It's not when the person is super free. Because when they're super free, they're actually doing things that they want to do, which is playing with their kids or walking the dog or doing something like that. So they're not, you know, they're not sensitive to that, even though they've got tons of time. And it's obviously not good when you're super busy, because if you're in work and you're looking at something, you're in work, you're zoned in, you can't really do it. It's those in between sort of super busy and not super busy. You're commuting, you're standing in line, you're sitting on the toilet, you know, stuff like that. It's like when, you know, you can sort of multitask. That's when the EB can come in and really make a difference.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, WeChat. So WeChat is, I assume, I don't know, because I've obviously got it as a consumer, but is there like a business account? Is that how it works? Where basically, there's a different channel. I set up a business account, there's a bunch of other features and stuff.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and yeah, most companies will set up something called a service account. And I think Tencent, who's the owner of WeChat, a very, very smart company, they limit the amount of push notifications a company can send through to their followers through WeChat to 4 push messages per month. And so if you're limited, it means the quality of those communications is increased substantially. So there's a lot of effort that employer branding teams put into curating great content to send out to their followers via WeChat. So they become very dynamic, very interactive, kind of digital newsletters with video, slideshows, all sorts of cool stuff. And there's gamification at almost every step. It's pretty interesting. So it's definitely not like Twitter, a volume-based, X, a volume-based channel. It's a quality-based channel.
I remember you saying something about this last time we talked about it, and I really love that idea. And it's surprising that it's not actually been more widely adopted. Like, you basically have a constraint as to how much you could send as a broadcast message in order to just avoid the slop that comes out. I mean, look, I'm on X because I need to be, but there's no question it's a miserable experience there because it's like completely festooned with AI bot chat. It's kind of lots of people just hustling for engagement when it's obviously not valuable stuff. It really has diluted its quality. Signal to noise is very poor. But if you're saying, you know what, you've only got 5 messages that you can broadcast a month or something, you got to make those count, haven't you? You really got to.
Sure.
Absolutely.
They're not just like ephemeral messaging. It's a serious marketing message. So that's really, really interesting.
I can share is in Siemens. Sorry, I can share in Siemens Energy. It is our company communications team. They are professionals on communications, and they are the owners of all the WeChat broadcasting newsletters. So it is not that just casually someone is writing something and then send it out. It's written and managed by pros, I would say.
Got a question here from Tony. I think it's quite interesting. Anybody knows, like, what are some prominent businesses that do manage WeChat well? If you do know, chuck them in the chat there and see what's what. Okay, Lin, let's go to you on sort of job boards. We talked about WeChat a little bit. We'll go back to WeChat. I don't think you can avoid it, but I'm interested with this idea that there are also like pretty standard job boards, it seems like, where post a job, people apply to it, and that's basically how it all works. What are those job boards? Are they sort of, how do they work? Is it mechanically the same in terms of what we're used to, let's say in Australia or in the US or in different places? Like, I asked you, Lin, because you've got this like ridiculous internationalized experience where seemingly I think you've worked in like every country in the world. So I wonder what your sort of, how you would compare the job boards in China compared to elsewhere.
I would say it's very different. In China, there will be like national ones that are really famous. For example, 51 job, Zhaoping, boss Zhiping. If you watch F1, you sometimes even see the boss Zhiping actually like sponsoring a couple of different like events and on cars. And those are usually for the young people. Lieping is typically for the more professional, like high end, like mid manager, like type of job. And sorry, I like had some internet connection earlier, but I did want to add to the earlier point about how companies are promoting. I think one thing that a lot of companies has been doing, at least for the Avature customers, because I think it started because of the COVID situation. People are locked down, can't go to university for campus recruiting. This is currently the actual campus recruiting season for a lot of companies, the spring hire. So a lot of people are doing virtual job fairs at the moment. So they, in the past, because China is such a huge country, so for the campus recruiting team to actually hop around campuses to do job fairs is really difficult. But for right now, with the trend, people get used to the virtual job fair, career fair. They will be able to talk to a lot of a lot more students in the entire country. So the recruiting team can actually focus on probably just visiting a few target schools that they typically work with a lot, and do that. So to add on to earlier around finding jobs, I think LinkedIn, they pulled out in China in terms of recruiting in China. But I think for there's in the past few years, China has been on this go global kind of strategy. A lot of Chinese companies are going overseas to set up shop, hiring people. So I think for foreigners who are actually looking for opportunities, or Chinese looking for opportunity elsewhere, I think LinkedIn is still a job board that, even though it's not as big a market share compared to the national job boards, and they have regional, like China is big. So for example, Guangdong has its own job board. Somewhere in the western part of China, they have their own job board. So I think in terms of that, it's a very different market. So
it would be great to do like some market map of how all this looks like. I can just visualize like a map of China with all of these job boards going on. That's a hint to you, Beecher. Get on with it, mate. Let's create something that's visually appealing. I think that'll be really interesting, because of course these provinces are huge. I mean, Guangdong has got what 80 million people, I think, something like this. It's the size of Germany, basically, if not larger. So it makes absolute sense that there may be regionalized job boards that probably you'd pay particular attention to if you're either located there or wanting to move in those places. Which leads me to the next point, actually. What about mobility, job mobility? We know there's the household registration system, which can sometimes be a very frustrating kind of way to get people moving around. I do understand there's a way to do this, and typically, companies that are particularly keen to hire, they would take on a lot of that responsibility. But it isn't quite the same as just rocking up to a city and trying to hustle for work, unless you're, probably at that casual labor market area, right? I assume so the labor flexibility is a little bit more constrained in the sense it's tied to the registration system. Is that true still, Beecher? Do you want to give us a sort of an overview update as to where we stand with the HUCO system?
Yeah, so as you said, it's the HUCO or household registration system limits where you can access government services, namely around healthcare and education. So the sort of well-developed cities in China, we call them first-tier cities like Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, Shenzhen. I think Hangzhou is almost like a first-tier city as well. They are generally wealthier, they've been developed for longer, and so their public infrastructure is more mature. So their hospitals are good, their education system's a little bit better. So if you're a professional working in one of these cities and your company says to you, or agency says to you, hey, we'd like you to work in what we would call a second or a third or even a fourth tier city, it really has a big impact on the family because the education system will be significantly different, and access to healthcare services is also going to be significantly different. So what you'll see is probably if that professional decides to take that role, it will almost be like an expatriation. They'll perhaps almost need a hardship allowance or some things like that, and they'll live away from their family. Their family will stay in the first tier city for usually for the children's education. And so it's a very odd sort of situation. But then if you look at the lower, the worker level, often those folks come from these other or more inland provinces where the standard of living is a little bit lower, and they'll be organized by labor agents labor agents to work in near the factories, which are often around the eastern seaboard, and they'll stay in dormitories. And so in that particular case, it's like a turnkey service where they're working labor agreements, their eligibility to work in those locations are all managed by the labor agency. However, for them, it's the reverse issue. They can't bring their kids necessarily or their spouses. And so their kids and their spouses are often left in those other provinces. The national government and the regional governments are looking into how to create a more flexible household registration system, because they do see this as one part of the overall puzzle to improve consumer sentiment and to raise living standards. But it is a difficult thing, and there are some kind of entrenched practices around there. But that to say, I think now more than ever, we're getting closer to having more flexibility. So maybe we're going to see we're going to continue to see changes in those areas. But it is a little bit of a challenge, frankly.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, the labor sort of constraint in the movement of labor is I think one of the reasons why basically slums don't seem to happen in China in the same way that they appear in other mega countries, for instance. Because when you have like uncontrolled immigration to a hot economic spot, eventually the infrastructure will collapse. It will not be able to deal with it. And of course, we talk about immigration all the time. Particularly, it's been a very popular topic in Western world. There, it's more like external immigration in. But of course, again, you talk about size and scale. Within China, you can see it as a mechanism of immigration management, because you've got to make sure that the infrastructure is available to absorb the new people coming in, whilst at the same time creating enough liquidity in the marketplace so that employers aren't spending huge amounts of money to recruit people, because that's one of the only reason why immigration happens really is because there's work and the people are not located where the work is, and people move there. That's it. That is what drives global immigration, internal, external. It's as simple as that. And we're all like trying to figure out best ways to manage that in such a way that needs of everyone gets satisfied. Okay, very good. We've got some questions being chucked in on LinkedIn. I just want to address them real quick. Jay's asked basic question on tech. I don't know where anyone answer this. What is the offer to join ratio in tech? Does anyone know this? Like, do people tend to accept their offers and turn up? Or is it a case where actually there's a lot of acceptances and reneges? Sometimes that's a problem in different countries, for instance. Or is the conversion rate quite high here? Like, can we apply an overly crude generalization to this? Because obviously, again, Tottenham make a country, but let's generalize. What is the offer to acceptance ratio, offer to join ratio, and technology hiring here, would you say?
That's a tough one.
Dodging the question.
Yeah, well, fine. It's a tough one. I can only share from my company, about my company, my personal experience in the company. In China, the offer acceptance ratio would be, let me put the other way around. So the candidate ratio who would decline or no show after accepting the offer, I would say approximately between 5 to 8%. We only recruit professionals. We rarely recruit blue-collar workers in China, but I would say like between 5 to 8%. It doesn't come very high. That is my personal experience. But of course, it depends on the different companies in different industries, and as well as what kind of recruitment that we are talking about. If it is like professional recruitment, the ratio, the candidate drop-off ratio or decline ratio would be a bit lower. For the campus recruitment, the ratio would be higher, definitely. But on average, it's between 5 to 8%. At least that is my experience.
Yep. Interesting. So let's shift really quickly. I've noticed the time. I want to talk about artificial intelligence and what the impact of that has been on both employer and candidate side. So from the employer side, what are we seeing in terms of artificial intelligence? What types of ways in which AI is being applied to the recruiting process? Again, anybody can pop in with an insight on this.
Lin, why don't you go? You guys come to great stuff.
Yeah. I can start from a lot of different areas. I think a lot of companies, especially the bigger enterprises, usually there will be an AI ethics board or some kind of council. So when it comes to that, I think a lot of companies want to look at what are some of the low risk but high value, low hanging fruits that can be applied to the entire process. For example, scheduling interview, certain things that are lower risk. And from a candidate perspective, what I wanted to share that I think it will be really helpful is like what Maria mentioned earlier. Some companies have a number of different jobs out there. But as a candidate, how do I know out of all those jobs, which is the job that is most suitable to me? So I think it will be real. Like AI has been helping in that process to sieve out based on my resume that I can upload to a company's career site, and letting me know that out of all the jobs in the database, these are the top 3 or 5 jobs that is really I have a higher match. Because I think for both of the company and the candidate, I want to, if I want to apply as a professional, if I want to apply for something, I want to understand that I'm actually putting the effort. If I'm going to write about, for example, a cover letter, I want to be able to showcase my skills and what is the contribution that I can make to the role. And that would really help, like in terms of how AI is helping because candidates do have the control in terms of what are the jobs that I want to apply. So it's a lower risk, but it's a win-win situation for both the candidate and the company.
That's really interesting.
Beecher, Maria.
What else? Yeah, I was interested in from Maria's side, you're working for a big co-op. Are you deploying any AI, like screening candidates with artificial intelligence? What's going on, with that? Are there any kind of things that are being pushed within the China market particularly?
Yeah, sure. I can also share. I would say that I see different pictures. China and other countries versus the rest of the world. That is one picture that I see, and also from the employer perspective, and also from employee perspective, and from TA or HR and versus IT perspective. So I do see many different pictures. Um, I would. I'm generalizing, so apologies for that. I know I'm generalizing, but in general, I think AI is more applied to, for example, recruitment in China or in real operation, doesn't matter whether it is in recruitment or in other industries, than in other countries, than in rest of the world. Data privacy, personal data privacy, information security in China, it is, at least my observation is, China is putting very strong restrictive limitation about data flowing outside of China. But within China, AI is very much used in many different ways. For example, our company has already adopted facial recognition for contract signing. So it's like 3 steps ahead of compared to that to the rest of the world. And whereas in other countries, we are still looking at where can we use AI in recruitment process? Can we use AI to support recruitment in candidate screening, in candidate sourcing candidates, etc. China is already using facial recognition for contract signing. We are outside of China. We're still looking at can we use e-signature instead of wet ink as signing of the contract. In China, we are already doing that. So it's very different. And also, sorry, you want to say something?
No, on this note, very important. I mean, candidate fraud is a huge issue, and in fact, we're starting to become aware of it. It's hitting the mainstream news. There's going to be a Brainfood Live on it a couple of weeks down the line, because basically, lots of community members are actually experiencing this, where we're seeing not only candidates not being who they are, different people actually taking the interview. We're seeing like deep fake kind of a cover of someone's face while they're doing interviews and stuff like this. Crazy. Like, where is the basically identity verification? I think is going to just come right to the fore for what recruiters do, because who else's fault is it going to be if your company hires somebody that is fraudulently the identity is fraudulent? It won't be a hiring manager's fault. It's going to be your fault. It's a recruiter's fault. There's nobody else is responsible for that. So we have to roll in. Go ahead. I interrupted.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, and I think also in the company as an employer, we are still trying to find ways, and companies like Siemens are very cautious. We are looking at all different ways to apply AI in everywhere. But as Xin just mentioned, we wanted to take the lower risk applications first and implement in some areas, piloted, for example, use AI to support the job description writing. On the candidate side, we also see that people are using AI for all different types of writing and activities, like you said about identity fraudulation, and also like using ChatGPT to write resumes. So it's a competition, and it's very dynamic. It's interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't mind, Hong, I'll just jump onto Maria and Lin's comments. The diffusion and cultural welcoming of AI in general in China is amazing. So AI in China is generally considered a force of good and excitement and opportunity, positivity. There's a lot of positive emotion around AI in general from a cultural and market level. And you contrast that with maybe the Europeans, who take a very planful approach to AI and sort of already have enacted legislation around, identifying the risk. And I'm not saying one's better or worse, but generally speaking, AI is being used very quickly for right or for wrong in all sorts of applications in China. And so Lin and Maria were talking about like sort of the low-hanging fruit where I can see some efficiencies. It's not the decision-making. We've had companies come up to us and say, I want AI automate everything. I want just one candidate at the end, and AI is going to be responsible for that candidate being the best performing, hire ever. And so that's the difference. Now, somewhere in between, we're going to need to come up with a practical AI framework that balances, outcomes and privacy.
Oh, we've lost Beecher again. But very interesting indeed about the embrace of AI in China, I think, is very different. There's less reticence, but also the push to basically go to open source, which I think is essentially something that was super surprising for a lot of people in the Western world, because obviously China has this external reputation as being, a super authoritarian type of system. Why would they ever go open source? That seems to be a very oxymoronic situation. But of course, open source has a massive diffusion effect of the technology into society and into industry. Basically you're not metering it. Like, imagine if you were metering the internet. Back in the day and in the early 2000s, there were companies that were trying to do that. They were saying, actually, yeah, your internet's going to be measured and you'd be charged on how much you'd use. Now we're all using the internet without charging. We think that's generally okay. We think, hey, that's normal. But actually, no, there was once a business model where it would actually be meted against you. And if you look at what's happening with AI, open AI, quote unquote, needs to be sort of doubt quoted every time you say that. Open AI are metering artificial intelligence to you, which ultimately means that you can't use that much of it, or if you do use that much of it, it'll get throttled, in which case the only people that can use it are the ones that are already with the resources, and likelihood the ones that are going to get extreme advantage from it. So if you go the open source model, suddenly everyone is on the level playing field. So that's basically going to help accelerate the adoption of AI throughout the country. Okay.
So
very,
can I just
very
add
interesting.
one last 30-second thing? And I realize I got cut out before, but I think conversely, AI is going to, because of these fraudulent topics that Maria and Lin just touched on, I think there's going to be a trend to final on-site, face-to-face, no gadgets interviewing, because you'll have all these sort of upfront steps that maybe AI can help the candidate misrepresent themselves effectively. And so that will be to such a degree that then it will force people to actually come together. They'll have to take out their earphones because otherwise AI will be telling them how to answer this question. They'll have to take off their glasses perhaps because otherwise, they'll have some VR, AR assisted responses. And it will just be kind of human to human connection for the final few steps before that hiring decision. So I think weirdly, AI may usher in a whole new era of human contact, but we got to go through some challenges to get to that point, I think.
Do you know what do you think of that, folks? Is AI going to completely unwind the entire digital era? Because we actually end up in a place where we can no longer trust anything digital. We have to roll back to recruitment vintage, because if you're going to hire a human being to work in your business, you're going to have to eyeball that person. You're going to have to press the flesh and actually understand who they are. And this goes all the way back to what recruitment was like before actually even computers got mainstream. I actually have a lot of sympathy for that view, Beecher, and I do believe that's one of the ways, in a kind of like really retrograde way, but one of the ways in which recruiters will be around will be that person that does these interviews, because there's going to come a point where we're not going to be able to trust anything that comes across that's being basically translated into a digital media. Right now we're talking to each other online, but our faces have basically been translated via this camera into pixels on someone else's screen. That is now subject to alteration and change. Whereas, how can we even trust what's going on there? I think we're very close to not being able to understand what's real or not on digital platform. So if we're serious about hiring people, depending on how important those hires are, I don't think we do it for every hire. I think there'll be a bifurcation of the types of people we're hiring. core team, I think, goes heavy human, human heavy, and AI light. And then kind of peripheral team, sort of say, will almost be entirely automated, and maybe human touch will be very light there. So we're going to have a very different type of way to deal with recruitment. But interesting and exciting as we go. Anyway, listen, we are coming to the end of this show. So, as ever with these things, an hour is never enough. It needs to be at least 2, 3, 4 hours to talk about it. Loads of things to take away, but real great education from our guests here. Obviously, we have to keep talking about China and how recruitment is evolving in the country. We'll have to do a round 2 at some point, probably even a regional one, if that makes any sense. I do intend to get up to Shanghai, by the way, whilst I'm in this part of the world, Beecher. So I will be trying to get up there, hopefully end of my journey here, which is last week is when I have a bit more time. My brother's just arrived, and his family here, so I've got to spend I've got to go to Disneyland tomorrow, for instance. Not my choice, but you know, nephew demands, so I'm there.
It'll be fun.
So I think it's
a good one.
Yeah, eat up a load of my time, but basically after sort of the 18th, I think I'm free again. So basically, I'll have more time, and I'll shoot up to Shanghai, hopefully. Okay, we've got to let everyone go. Maria Ma, thank you so much for joining. Beecher Ashley-Brown, wonderful to get your contribution as usual. Lin, really great to see you. We're going to catch up next week, so I look forward to doing that as well. Take care, everyone. Thanks for watching. We'll be back later this week. We are talking about sourcing automation, what can be done in recruiting today by individual DIYing recruiters. So we're not talking about vendor-delivered AI. We're talking about just random people who are plugging together different things. Can they actually come up with decent sort of automation approaches? We've got a bunch of recruiters who think they can. So make sure you join us for that. It's going to be UK time centric, unfortunately. So it's going to be Hong Kong time, I think 9 o'clock, maybe even on Friday. But it will be 1 or 2 o'clock UK time. So make sure you tune in for that. We'll get educated that way. Okay, that's it. Let's let everyone go. Have a very good day, everyone. Have a very good evening if you're in Asia. And we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.